Hey everyone. Fan service and censorship of fan service are hot topics in gaming these days. Most people who actually play games to have fun and not for activist reasons would agree that fan service is good and censorship is bad. Since the AAA gaming industry has basically been infiltrated at every level by radical, man-hating feminists and their male allies, content that panders to the so-called male gaze, or even just normal-looking female characters who don't look like men, has become virtually non-existent in Western games. There are occasionally exceptions, like the upcoming game Clair Obscur Expedition 33 from the French studio Sandfall Interactive, but such exceptions are a rarity. Although there is no blatant fan service from what we can see in the trailer, the female character designs are pleasing to look at. How can we fix this problem? Woke video game companies that hate giving men what they want have been kept afloat in spite of poor sales in large part by investor money. But investor money is not infinite. The general agreement among gamers is that the best way we can hit them where it hurts is by voting with our wallets. Where do we draw the line, though? The answer to that question will be different for everyone. Here's my opinion. Sometimes, when it comes to fan service, it is okay to say, good enough. What do I mean by this? Well, some people will take a hardline stance. A game not having the amount or the kind of fan service they want will be reason enough to boycott completely. Others will say, I don't have everything I want, but I have enough of what I want that it hardly even matters. Since there is more to what determines whether or not a game is good than fan service, I believe that the question of when it is silly to bother worrying about it is a legitimate one. Let me talk about 3 different games, what others thought about them, and what I think about them to illustrate what I mean. First up, we have Stellar Blade. Everyone knows by now what happened with that game. The developers promised an uncensored game, and then the game was apparently censored after release. I want to briefly focus on a related note here before I continue. I thought at first, and many people still think, that the game was censored at the behest of Censor Station, aka PlayStation. I no longer believe that. Very shortly before development of Stellar Blade wrapped up, Korea became hyper-aggressive on enforcing copyrights related to real-life outfits. Since Stellar Blade had basically copied some real-life outfits, more or less exactly, the company probably had to roll out a patch quickly in order to avoid risking a lawsuit. This seems likely to me because the fact that they censored those outfits and then released new ones that were just as lewd never made sense to me. Getting back to the fan service issue, though, I was disappointed that they never reversed the censorship. Even with the censorship, however, the game still had outrageous amounts of sex appeal. But then they went and released those new outfits, which were basically alternative, uncensored versions of the outfits that got nerfed. I found myself asking the question, yeah, this whole business sucks, but given what we still have, does it even matter? At that point, it is just splitting hairs. Some people will say do not buy because they never reverse the changes. What if I have decided for myself that the existing fan service is enough to satisfy me? It's all very subjective. In the case of Stellar Blade, I have said good enough, and I will be purchasing it when it releases on Steam. The second game I want to talk about is Granblue Fantasy Relink. When the game released, many called for a boycott. This was because some outfits had been censored from what they were in previous games. I looked at the game, though, and I asked myself a few questions. What is the focus of the game? Is it fan service? Not from what I could see. It looked like it had fun gameplay, beautiful art, and an epic soundtrack. Is there any fan service at all? There is some, yes, but it's not excessive. Mainly what was removed was the ability to look up characters' skirts. Again, there is more to a good game than just fan service. Was it going to skip out on what looked like a pretty good game just because I couldn't see some underwear? Yeah, I don't think so. In the case of Granblue Fantasy Relink, I have said good enough. The third and final game is Lollipop Chainsaw Repop. The developers promised an uncensored game, and I believe that is what they delivered. Some people were not convinced, however. It was noted that Juliet's boobs did not bounce as much in some instances in the remastered release as they did in the original. That does not mean there was no bounce at all, though, because there was definitely boob movement in other scenes. It made no sense to me that they would scale back the movement in some cases, but not in others. Given the fact that even the very revealing shell bikini is there in all of its uncensored splendor, I did not see how this could be intentional. Some people with game development knowledge said it was likely an engine issue, since it was an old game that had been ported into a new engine. The developer has since confirmed that this is indeed a technical issue and will be fixed in a future update. What if it had been intentionally altered, though? Would having slightly less bounce sometimes really affect a person's enjoyment of the game overall, so much that they should boycott it completely? In the case of Lollipop Chainsaw Repop, I have said good enough. Now I understand that if you give these activists an inch, they take a mile. I know there is probably merit to taking a hardline stance against any and all censorship. The only way we will send a message to the industry is by voting with our wallets. I do think, however, that there comes a point where obsessing over some things can be considered absurd. For me, it comes down to whether or not fan service can be considered to be a major aspect of the game or not, and what the rest of the game is like. Again, there is more to a good game than fan service, so I take into account the perceived overall quality of the game when making a decision to buy or not to buy. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.